יחיה ויחדהו, אורך ימים אספיהו ויראהו בשועתי, אורך ימים אספיהו ויראהו בשועתי.
Friends and family, please join underneath the tent. Okay.
Can I ask immediate mourners to please sit down? Ask everyone else to please socially distance, but gather around the tent. We're about to begin the service for Mrs. Becker. Ask any of you who have any noise-making devices or any cell phones to please turn them to the off position. Thank you. Officiating today will be Rabbi Michael Schwab from North Suburban Synagogue, Bethel.
In Florence Becker's memory, I'm going to recite first from Psalm 15, which speaks about a person of integrity. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai miyagur bo'olech, hamishkon b'har kodshecha, holech tamim u'foel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo, lo ragal al leshono, lo asal reu ra'a v'cherpa lo nasal krovo, Nivze beinav nim'as, v'et yirei Adonai yichabed. Nishba larav v'lo yamir, kaspo lo natan b'neshech, v'shochad anaki lo lakach. Ose ele lo yimot le'olam. A Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter into God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity. Do what is right. Speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander on your tongue. Do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn those who are contemptible, but honor those who revere God. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, and you shall stand firm forever. Now recite from Psalm 23. After I do it in the Hebrew, if you'd like to, you can say it with me in the English, the English is inside the service brochures they gave you. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo aksar, binoteh shayar bitzeni, ame menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi eshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo, gam ki elech begei tzal mavet, Lo ira ki ata imadi, shiftecha u'mishan techa hema, hinachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai, dishanta v'Hashem roshi kol sirvaya. Ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai, Vishavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Please recite with me in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This, of course, is our prayer and our faith and our belief that Florence Becker dwells in the house of the Lord and will continue forever. As our great philosopher Ben Sira once wrote, when parents who have taught their children pass on, that passing is not death. As long as the child lives, and all the more so, grandchildren and so on, that part of the parents can never die. When alive, a parent rejoices with her children, and in death, that parent will not grieve, for she knows that her legacy passes down from generation to generation, l'dor vador, through each of her family members and those who will remember her. In our treasured Tanakh, in the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms, it states about the Messianic era, then our mouths shall be filled with laughter. Laughter is clearly a sign of joy and holiness for the book of Psalms, and as the Talmud tells us, it is going to be filled in the hearts of those in the Messianic era. And further, we're right in the mix of the Torah portions, the Parshiot, when we speak about Yitzchak, Isaac, our great patriarch, whose very name means laughter. For Isaac embodied laughter. Our tradition tells us that his laughter indicated that Isaac mastered the skill of seeing the good in unexpected places. He had the ability to mine the holiness that lay in the heart of every person and in the soul of every activity. He knew that laughter is an opportunity to transcend limitations that blind us to seeing God more clearly. Even when things look bad, even when we're suffering, in some way, we need to find a reason for joy, as there are always some blessings in life and caring forces like God, family, and love that will be there to sustain us. Today, as we all know, we come to honor the memory of Florence Becker, who, by all accounts, my own included, was a funny, witty person who absolutely loved to laugh. Her laughter, too, was a symbol of her deep love for others, her joy in being with others, and her desire to bring goodness into the lives of those around her. She was a woman with a big heart who was fiercely independent, moral, progressive, and caring, and the world is definitely a poor place without her. Therefore, at this time, it is my sad honor to express the condolences of her synagogue community, my synagogue at North Suburban Synagogue Bethel, to her beloved children, of course, to Michael and to Dory, to David and to Dana, and to Donna as well, and to her adored grandchildren, Joey, Sasha, Jessica, Esty, Yehuda, Avi, Yaakov, and Shimi, and to her loving brother Leon, and to his wife Cynthia, as well as to all the wonderful family and friends who are here in person or over the Zoom or only here with us in spirit today. Everyone will miss her, you most of all. My prayer is that the words we share today and the rituals of our tradition will provide you with some measure of comfort at what's clearly a difficult time for you and for your family. In a few moments, a number of family members who knew Florence best will share some words and talk about her life. Therefore, I just want to note a couple of quick things. First of all, you all know that Florence was a professor of English at Olive Harvey College. But maybe you don't know that she was not just a knowledgeable educator. Of course you know she truly cared about her students. And even people who were not yet her students. Donna shared with me that when they were kids, they lived on the south side of Chicago in Jeffrey Manor. Florence met a young guy named Salvador at Wishy Washy Car Wash at the corner of 95th and Stony Island. She asked him if he was in school. He said no, that he could not afford it. Well, Florence did not accept that. She told him that he needed to be in college. So she arranged for him to come to Olive Harvey, got him registered, gave him a job in the English lab so he could afford to now be in school. And because of her compassion and initiative, his life was forever changed. That was the kind of person she was. Take charge, full of heart, and leading with her values. Second, I just want to note that her Judaism was very important to her. She was a proud member of Bethel. She provided her children with a strong Jewish education. She studied herself at the Spertus College of Jewish Studies and even taught Sunday school. She cared about Jewish values. She cared about Jewish holidays. And she cared about the state of Israel. In truth, I certainly did not know her as well as most of you. But when I did interact with her, I admired her combination of strength, conviction, honesty, and caring, all wrapped into a smile, a laugh, or a funny story. Tini Shmata Tzura B'Tzura Chaim. May her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life, and let everyone here say Amen. So I know that Cousin Elaine, or maybe Cousin Elaine and Lauren, are going to say a few words.
For the one person who doesn't know me, I'm the Cousin Lauren. This is the Cousin Elaine. I'll go first. We ended up doing similar things separately. Okay. Poetry was her strong suit, all would agree. So this little ditty is a tribute to Flo, our auntie. We were small and she was glamorous with bouffant hair, and snack bags she made were beyond compare. The inventor of the bite-sized candy bar, it's true, a candy feast began each Becker rendezvous. Her storytelling was second to none. When she told you a secret, you thought you were the only one. Traveling with Auntie Flo was always a blast. No one had to worry that the food wouldn't last. When I think about it today, I cannot understand how all 7 of us fit in one sedan. But off we would go with Frida and Flo to see Auntie Shu and our cousins in the North Pole. Skokie was very far from the south side, but these sisters pretended they could drive. I could go on and on about the fun we had, laughing and laughing like we all were mad. We had each other and an amazing cast of women to helped inform our past. Frida, Shu, and Flo knew how to have fun together. They were sisters who loved each other like no other. Auntie Flo had some qualities her siblings did not share. She could knit and sew and make things a pair. If there is one thing I can say about Auntie Flo, she always kept us on our toes. She was funny, irreverent, and smart, and had a gigantic, beautiful heart. We will miss seeing Auntie Flo at family affairs, but her humor, grace, and love will always be there. Auntie Flo, my little rhyme is nothing compared to what you would have done, but trying one for you was loads of fun. Thank you, Auntie Flo, for always being true to you. From the bottom of our hearts, we will always miss you.
I'm Elaine, and Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, a celebrated moral thinker and globally beloved intellect of Judaism, died a week ago on Saturday, 1 week before Auntie Flo, and these are his words. In this anti-traditional age, with its hostility to ritual and its preference for the public display of private emotion, the idea that grief has its laws and limits sounds strange. Yet almost anyone who has had the misfortune to be bereaved can testify to the profound healing brought about by observance of the laws of Avelut, mourning. Our Torah and tradition knew how to honor both the dead and the living, sustaining the delicate balance between grief and consolation, the loss of life that gives us pain, and the reaffirmation that gives us hope. Auntie Flo lived this profoundly, having suffered many traumatic losses in her life, while constantly reaffirming life with each and every one of you. Standing intimately before you to honor the memory of Auntie Flo is a privilege. Thank you. Along with Lauren, I'm representing our siblings, our families, our cousins, and their families. To me, this setting ironically speaks to exactly who our Auntie Flo of blessed memory was. Excuse my language, no BS, none. She had an impeccable moral compass, knew herself to the core, and she knew you. She did not live a life of false words, of delusion. While Auntie Flo was a gifted master of letters and words, she did not bestow them undeservedly. Donna, as a mother, it is truly impossible for me to fathom a more devoted daughter than you. You loved and cared for your mother with unending kindness and grace for years. And while you may have not responded to every single crazy request, like throw her off the roof or something, you did everything in your power to make her comfortable and calm and make her happy in these final days. Your beautiful handmade gifts of knitted baby blankets and baby photo, everything that we love so much, bring to memory your mother's artistic talents. Her singer sewing machine mastery made some magic happen. These extraordinary times demand something unprecedented in terms of devotion, loving, and caring for an elderly parent, and you provided that. David, your decision long ago to lead an observant Jewish life with Dana and to raise the most beautiful family with the timeless values of Torah enriched and transformed Auntie Flo's life. Esti, Yehuda, Yaakov, Avi, and Shimi, I was always amazed at the impeccable detail that your grandmother would share about every aspect of where you were studying, what you were studying, and what was on your life's horizon. Michael, Dory, Joey, Sasha, and Jesse, you were blessed to have your flow richly woven into your day-to-day existence. Each of you are surely bursting with the memories of her sharp wit, astute wisdom, wacky and wonderful ways that will forever be part of you and of your families to come. Michael, while this is surely not the 62nd birthday you imagined, I will close my words in the way that we have communicated for every November 2nd and November 16th that I can remember, and sorry to the rest of you, another Lome poem. A collaborator, a confident, loyal friend, and most devoted son you have been. For us and our children, important relationship lessons to learn, yet again. Your symbiotic ways reflect a mother and son tie that was quite unique, endless admiration, respect, and truly listening even while disagreeing, so to speak. Next to the sisters Lome, Flo Shu, and Frida, all other ladies are wallflowers. Now together, these magnificent queen of the Jews define extreme girl power. Apartment evictions forced Grandma Mary into real estate dedication. Now we, along with you and Uncle Lily, partner for the sake of future Lome generations. Amongst our generation of cousins, I'm overjoyed to have Levi and Stella making me the first bubby. Age-appropriate girls, look up to Flo, Frida, and Shu, I'm sure. Do you really need a hubby? It's impossible to grasp just how fast this blessed life goes, and you can all be sure Auntie Flo is now wincing with this prose. May God comfort you all and the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem.
Beautiful tributes. Now I'm going to ask Donna to come up, and you're going to read a letter from Andrea, correct? I'll stay here if you want.
So this is a letter from my cousin Andrea, who can't be here, that I'm going to read on her behalf. I'm going to try. I might need some backup. Dear Michael, David, and Donna, while it's awkward to start out this letter with lucky, lucky me, that is the truest sentiment that I can convey right now. The three words your mom invoked so very often have been emblazed upon my spirit for decades. Thanks to Auntie Flo, I'm surrounded by a growing world of lucky, lucky meers. Long ago, I came to believe that those 3 words, whether this is actually true or not, reflected your mom's quiet bow for the gift she was given, to live life. At a young, formative, and tumultuous age, she lost her father, William Lome, only to be followed by the profound tragedies of the death of Willie, William Lome's namesake, and then the only true love of your mom's life, your dad and our Uncle Gene. It seemed like your mom's heart never spent a second separated from your father's. She miraculously shouldered the roles of mother, father, breadwinner, homemaker, sister, daughter, and daughter-in-law, professor, champion, always of the underdog, grandmother, and memory maker, with little, if any, help from the outside. Auntie Flo's strength, conviction, intelligence, meticulousness, fortitude, and elegance remained firmly intact throughout her entire life. From my vantage point, growing up in Skokie, under Shoe and Shell's tutelage, in close proximity to Grandma Mary, and the Lome family was, shall we say, emotionally confusing. So very little of what I was exposed to in those early days made any sense to me, and then less so as I grew older. For me, your mom was a shining beacon of Lome light. She, like no other person I was exposed to, knew herself, stayed the course, while always remaining true to her values and convictions. She knew the truth and told the truth always. Don't get me wrong, there's not a lot of Lome of that generation that escaped some unique form of crazy. As our generation witnessed, cray-cray, as Maya puts it, in the Lome family was simply a matter of degree and direction. Auntie Flo's kind of crazy just happened to be the one that I resonated as comfortable for me. Your mom provided a safe place to land throughout my entire life. At family gatherings, Auntie Flo would pat the seat of a chair and emphatically say, with her fingers covering her lips as if no one knew what she was up to, "Come here, sit down next to me. I want to talk to you about something." For me, this was like being invited to sit at the Queen's table. Skip the idle chatter, skip the small talk, jump feet first into the good dirt. My only regret is that I wasn't a better smoking partner. And at one point in our otherwise seamless and true blue auntie-niece history, we hit a painful bump in the road when Bubby's heart, Bubby is Andrea's mother, my Auntie Shoe, but we all know her as Bubby Shoe or just Bubby. When Bubby's heart broke in two, as did the family business. Bubby's innocence and naivete couldn't reconcile the dark shadows that precipitated the family's split. I carried all of Bubby's shattered spirit and dumped it angrily and squarely on your mom's lap. Auntie Flo, with the patience of a genteel saint and the unconditional love of a mother for her daughter, held my hand and talked me through to a place of healing. Auntie Flo provided the safest of conditions for us that forged an even tighter and more seamless bond than what we had had before. What followed for Bubby and Auntie Flo, as well as Auntie Frida, was the continuation of best friendship. I don't believe your mom missed but a few, if any, of Bubby's bi-weekly dialysis sessions. She meticulously recorded her numbers and cataloged every result. She mastered Florence Nightingale as the sister, the doctor, the nurse, and the scientist. As you know, for decades, spending time with your mom was genuinely one of the most meaningful aspects of my trips back to Chicago from Seattle. And recent years started to consistently add up to your mom's physical strength and health slipping, without a reversal back to our spry and energetically buoyant Auntie Flo. When she and I would chat, When she and I would chat, I would get off the call so grateful to have had more engaged and with it conversations about the kids, travel, and mine and Jerry's projects than expected. Last year, I got a queen bee in my bonnet. I wanted to be in Chicago for your mom's 89th birthday. My flight from Seattle to Chicago was scheduled for March 13th, just as the entire country went on lockdown due to COVID-19. Michael and I agreed that there was no way around the care facility's lockdown. There was no way that I would be let in or able to see her. Especially over the course of this past year, thank you to Donna, who navigated and coordinated calls for me and Auntie Flo, and I am sure for so many others. And over time, as Auntie Flo had more difficulty, thank you for coordinating and stitching our conversations together between meals and 24/7 caregiving. In late October, just over 2 weeks ago, what appeared as a politically motivated trip to Detroit to protect the vote was in fact centered around what I knew would be my last visit with my Auntie Flo. For weeks, I stalked Donna, who had just barely recovered from surgery herself. Our eventual phone and texting communication was reflective of the fait complete nature of my upcoming Auntie Flo visit. On October 28th at 5:30, Michael and I walked into Auntie Flo's home and then into her bedroom. Flo looked more beautiful than I thought possible. Her hair was soft and pretty with a healthy mixture of white, gray, and black, and her skin was smooth and porcelain-like. Donna put just the right amount of makeup on to accentuate the remarkable natural beauty of her still exquisite features. While Michael and I visited, she talked repeatedly about us going to a baseball game. And Auntie Flo was cogent enough to make it perfectly clear that we, Michael and I, not her, would be going to the game. Michael said, "Mom, are you going to the game with us?" And she said, "Hell no." That night, I broke all COVID rules. Auntie Flo and I were together alone. Michael had gone to pick up dinner. Donna was in the kitchen. I sat on Auntie Flo's bed. We held hands. I showed her pictures of Sophie and Simon and Sarah. She clearly tracked my short stories about Simon and Sarah's upcoming vagabonding and Sophie's new job at Amazon. I took my time letting her know how deeply I loved her and how much she meant to me throughout my entire life. We looked deeply and calmly into one another's eyes. We held that gaze for a while. We knew what we knew to be true. All my love, forever and always, Andrea Eve. Andrea, I just want to say thanks for your letter.
Thank you to Andrea and to Donna. Jesse and Sasha, I don't know if you want to come up together or one at a time, but you guys can come up now.
Growing up in my home, gender roles never existed. There was no such thing as a Becker woman who was not strong, independent, and tough. That legacy starts with Grandma Flo. She taught us grit, she taught us strength. She taught us to take up space everywhere we went. Today, I would tell Grandma Flo that I am very sad. She would look at me, wave her hand, and say, "Well, don't be." There is absolutely nothing that could stop Grandma Flo. She holds her head up and keeps on going, no matter what. One of my favorite days of high school was Grandparents' Day for the seniors. I told Grandma that only the cool kids sit in the commons. So of course, she plopped herself down right in the center during our lunch period. We gossiped, and shared her food, because she would never eat it all. even though she would in fact eat it all. The Bachelorette and the Bachelor will never be the same without our debriefings. Thank you for always wanting to hear about my trips to the hair salon and telling me about your new nail colors. And Grandma, your nails were beautiful through the very end. And so are you. I know you'll never believe it, but you are absolutely beautiful, with or without your perm and red lipstick and blue eyeshadow. One day last year, my dad and I visited Grandma at the rehab center. She was tired, but once I started talking about my internship with the public defender's office, nobody had ever asked me more questions. I was so happy to talk to her about it because it was my passion, is my passion, and she loved hearing every second of it. We spent hours discussing the crazy cases until my dad was pushing me out the door. Last month, Grandma called me to wish me a happy birthday. She was having trouble staying in the conversation, but she did muster up enough energy to tell me that she loved me and to ask, "Jessie, how are your law school applications?" Grandma Flo made us feel like the only grandchildren in the world. She took care of us and made us feel special. She made us laugh until we had tears in our eyes, and then she would keep howling in laughter far after the joke was told. We were her gift, and she was ours. She made us the people we are today. We have Grandma Flo to thank for our resilience and strength, and we have Grandma to thank for this beautiful family and amazing life. She raised the best father I could ever ask for. I love you, Daddy. And she is the best grandma in the world. Lucky, lucky us to have her in our lives. We love you, Grandma. And on my letter to her, I wrote the little face that she always draws on all of our birthday cards. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I thought I could just share a couple of stories to highlight what a truly amazing person my grandma was. Grandma Flo had this incredibly unique quality of effortlessly making whoever she was speaking to feel like the most special, wonderful, beautiful person to ever grace the planet. As her granddaughter, this was a huge plus. One time, when I was in about second grade, I decided I was going to be a musician. I'd asked my parents for piano, to which they had said no, given my pretty constant habit of insisting to try a new hobby and then giving it up 2 weeks later. One Saturday afternoon, we were at my grandma's Flo house, and I said, "Grandma, isn't it possible that I could be one of the best piano players in the whole world, and I'll never know because my parents won't get me a piano?" To which she replied, "Oh, absolutely. In fact, I already know you'll be one of the best. Michael, get my granddaughter a piano." Grandma was also so incredibly bright, but busy reminding all of us that sometimes you would almost forget how exceptional her mind was. A couple years ago, my mom found what we thought to be an old letter written in Hebrew in my Grandma Judy's house. She brought it home, and all 5 of us struggled with absolutely no success to read and make sense of the Hebrew. A couple weeks later, we were talking about the letter with my Grandma Flo, and she said, "Oh, let me see." She then said, "You guys, this is Yiddish, not Hebrew," and began to read the letter aloud. My jaw dropped. Finally, she was hilarious and eccentric in all the best ways possible. She would effortlessly command the attention of a room and loved to make people laugh. She was especially funny while telling a secret. A few years ago, we were sitting at Joey's law school graduation, which was more dry than you could possibly imagine. Sorry, Joe. She turned to me and she goes, "God, Sasha, get me out of here." Sitting in the middle of this very quiet ceremony, we laughed and laughed. Her laugh was the most enchanting and warm laugh I've yet to hear. If I could go back, I would have recorded it, because it was the true essence of my grandma. But I do think that for the rest of my life, when I hear an especially joyful, endearing laugh, I'll think of her. Lucky, lucky us to have had such a strong, tough as nails, loving grandma. Thank you for being unapologetically you and teaching me how to be unapologetically me. I'll miss you always, and I'll love you forever.
More beautiful testimonials. David, now I'm going to call you up to say some words.
when someone passes out of the world, a lot of beautiful things can pass with them, and that's not supposed to be. We're really supposed to take that baton and, in our own ways, in our individual ways and little ways, run with it. So I want to talk about some of my mother's unbelievable attributes. Mom really got me started with God. When my father died, she was left with 3 kids and a single mother. And I shudder to think about what that job looked like to her. But she would say, I remember very clearly since I was a kid, she would say, God is with us, God is helping us. And, when I started on my, or continued on my spiritual path, and I started to hear that message, people talking like that, it rang a bell. I said, oh, that relationship, I heard about that. My mother was extremely generous. She was generous with all of us, and her generosity had a particular flavor. You didn't have to ask her. Your obligation was not to ask. She took it as her obligation to give. And even like birthday presents, if she missed the date of the birthday present, she would say, I owe you. And it wasn't an I owe you that I'm obligated and it's a burden. The I owe you it was her pleasure. It was her pleasure that she knew her job was to give. She wanted that job. And, and every season, every holiday season, I don't know how many hundreds of checks she wrote, dozens of checks. It seemed like hundreds of checks, and she gave to everyone, every religion, every charity of every religion, the Salvation Army, the United Way, every orphanage, every school, and it was not like, I'm going to do this now. It was like tax season for an accountant. I got work to do. I need to give, and she understood life was I need to give. That's my job, and she loved that job. My mother was extremely encouraging, like you hear from the grandkids and from us. She was and that's a Lome trait through and through. And I feel like the 3 sisters were like the chorus of encouragement. I could hear it in my ears. It was always, I could hear it from each one of them. They would say, "Good for you." It was always, "Good for you. That is so great." And they knew how to encourage people, and my mother knew how to encourage people. And she felt like her job was to encourage people. And that story about Salvador, to me that really represents a lot about my mom. That, she stopped at this car wash. And our message to this kid was, you can do better. Your life can be better, and I'm going to help you. And she did. She loved that job. Growing up, especially as teenagers, our house was not always marked by harmony or by accord. But my mother was always first to try to come together again. And she would do this thing where she would say, "Hand of friendship." And I can see her hand with that red nail polish, like laser lights. She'd say, "Hand of friendship." And sometimes I did not want to be appeased. I did not want to take the hand of friendship because I was still stewing. But I couldn't refuse it because you saw that it broke my mother's heart to have conflict. Everyone knows that. Broke my mother's heart to be involved in any kind of conflict. So you took her hand. Finally, I want to talk about this thing that everyone notes, her smile. There's something called, it's called in Hebrew, Sever Panim Yafos. It's a special mitzvah to greet people with a smile, with a face that you're thrilled to see them. And my mother was very much like that. She was thrilled to see people, and she wanted to be that person in that moment to tell them, You are wonderful. You are everything. And you got to believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I'm now going to have Michael come up and say some words.
My pocket.
Lucky us to have had my mom, your mother-in-law, your sister, your sister-in-law, your grandmother, your aunt, your friend in our lives. She was a trailblazer, incredibly strong-willed and independent, confident of herself and her capabilities, and nothing was going to get into her way. Yet she was kind and sweet and loving. She described herself as a quiet kid, lost in the chaos of 5 loud brothers and sisters, and often told stories of them locking her in the closet, but she did not mind because she got smart and hid books, crayons, and paper in the closet. When her father passed away, she was 12, and she described that as an incredibly sad time in her life. She loved and admired her mother deeply, but due to birth order, as the oldest girl, she was appointed chief cook and bottle washer. And that was clearly not a fate that aligned with her plans. As far as she was concerned, they could figure it out on their own. At 16, she was sick of getting locked in the closet, sick of doing laundry and washing dishes, and she moved out on her own. Grandma Mary had friends in high places, and she sent the beat cop to collect my mother and bring her home. At 17, she planned her second breakout and told her mother, "Just try and stop me." And her mother knew that she was no match for her daughter's will and determination. She enrolled in college, and she met my father when she was 19, whom she was wild about. But of course, because of her strong armor, she always had to play it cool. Frida would tell stories of my mom dragging her and Lan to the park to play. But in reality, they would hide in the bushes and spy on my father playing baseball. My mother would never tell those stories, but she could not deny them. It was a be careful what you wish for, because they dated and my father asked her to get married. Her response was, "Ho, ho, ho. Are you kidding?" And she decided that he was nothing but a passing distraction. Then she married him 5 years later at 24 and had my brother Willie at 25 and me at 27. Willie died when he was 4, and it crushed her. But she picked up the pieces and she never let it impact me. 4 years later, she had David, and 6 years later, she had Donna. When my mother was 34, my father died of a heart attack at 39, leaving her a widow with 3 small kids and no money. But she was smart and resourceful. And a year later, she was an assistant professor at Southeast Junior College. We had food on the table, cigarettes in her purse, and a smile on her face. I remember high holiday services as a kid, shortly after Cynthia and Lan got married. And Cynthia coming to our family was like Elizabeth Taylor landed in the middle of the Lome family. And we couldn't believe it. We were all starstruck, including my mother. So we were sitting at services at a Good as Achim, and Cynthia and Lan walked in because you were living in South Shore at the time. And you sat in the row in front of us, and my mother popped up from sitting next to me and wanted to go sit next to you. And Cynthia, of course, was very quiet and appropriate in synagogue, but my mother and Lan were at the other end of the spectrum. And this went on every single year, sorry, Rabbi, because I know you've heard them at Bethel. It was like a party. They could not stop talking and laughing. And at first I was embarrassed because everybody around them was giving them that look. And then I just figured, not everybody's trainable, and I just went with it. When the Beckers and Browns lived on the south side, my mother and Frida loved going out on bums. A bum to us was the kids getting together. A bum to them was a cigarette and coffee fest. We would all get in the car and we would go to Mel Marcon's, and between the 7 of us, we got to order 5 burgers. You figure that one out. No pops and no dessert. In order to do that, they would tell us, but I somewhat remember that they would have to return those glass pop bottles in order to raise money for dinner. But they did it with a smile on their face and love in their hearts and cigarettes hanging out of their mouths. They were tough chicks. When we got really lucky, we would all get in the car and meet Shu, Shell, and Elaine, Andrea, and Wayne for dinner. Us folks from the South Side thought they were the coolest. Not only did they live in Skokie, but they had red hair. They got to order drinks. They got pops and they got desserts. And Wayne, even at a young age, was always the king of appropriateness and decorum. For dessert, would order chocolate ice cream. Pick up a scoop of chocolate with a spoon, let it pop in its back in its glass, and look at all of us and say, "What does this remind you of?" That was it. All hell broke loose, and my mother would be concerned because David had asthma and could not stop laughing. The wrath of the 3 Lome women mothers gave us one look, and we would all become immediately quiet, except for David, who never really got it and could not stop laughing. She was a woman's liber, chapter chairman of her teachers' union, and took her college out on strike. She was truly Norma Ray. She led the relocation of Southeast Junior College to a new location and was instrumental in its renaming Olive Harvey College, named after a black soldier and a white soldier who died in Vietnam. We already did the wishy-washy car wash, but you guys left something out because you see Salvador didn't listen to her immediately and you didn't mess around with Mom. She went back every week. We had the cleanest car on the block until she finally told Salvador that he better show up. And he did, and she did change his life. She was a woman of small stature, but powerful, and she was working in a brown and black college, and her mission was to force them to see that they had potential beyond their imagination. And she was very successful. Many of her students loved her. They'd say, "You rock, Mrs. Becker. High five, Mrs. Becker. You have cool wheels, Mrs. Becker." She loved her Aurora Oldsmobiles. We moved to Homewood when I was 12, and we hit what I would call the turbulent years. AKA Mike's plan to be cool in high school. Sneaking out at 11 o'clock at night by leaving the sliding glass doors open and going out to split 6-packs with my friends. I thought that was it. Coming home after splitting a 6-pack and literally being 3 sheets to the wind, I was very carefully and quietly what I thought walking up the back stairs, only to find this foreboding figure standing at the top of the stairs with the black hair and the black bangs and a cigarette in her mouth saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "You want a beer, Mom?" My friends in high school thought my mother was Morticia Adams. Because, she had the look with the cigarette hanging out of her mouth. And while it was completely unintentional, she really contributed to the cool factor because I became somebody that you should know. When my brother and I had our occasional fights, my mother would call the police. And where some people hide their issues in the attic and others bring them into the living room, my mother brought them out into the street. There would be a cop car in our driveway with the lights flashing. There would be a cop car in the street, and my mother would stroll down the steps, smoking a cigarette, and go chat with the neighbors. It was fun to be the crazy family on the block. She hated everyone I ever dated, or ever even thought about dating, until I met Dory. And I can't say initially that my mother was warm and fuzzy, but once she got to know Dory, the sun truly rose and set on her. She was thrilled to have Dory as a daughter-in-law, and equally thrilled that I was marrying a doctor. It was the biggest feather in her cap, and she did not let it go unnoticed. When Joey was born, life changed. Joey was the apple of her eye, the light of her life, and the most magnificent child that ever graced the face of the earth. A couple of years later, she moved to Deerfield. And I'd call her and I'd say, "Mom, let's go out for dinner." And she'd say, "Absolutely not." And I'd say, "Okay." And she'd say, "Okay, where should I meet you? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'd call and say, Mom, you want to go to one of Joey's soccer games? And she would say, absolutely not. And she'd say, okay, where is it? I'd call and say, do you want to go to Sasha or Jesse's ballet recital? And again, absolutely not. She goes, all right, pick me up in 20 minutes. I said, but Mom, it isn't until 2 o'clock this afternoon. She goes, okay, well, I may change my mind. You didn't mess around with my mom. One time when Dory and I were at work and Joey was probably 3 years old, she came over to visit. Sasha was just born. And she left, and she saw our dog, Junior, bearded collie, kind of romping through the streets. And our housekeeper, Nanny, didn't even know that he had escaped. And she got out of the car, and she was not a dog lover, but she liked my dog. She got out of the car, and she said, Junior, get in the car. And Junior just kind of looked at her and kept on walking. And she said, Junior, get in the car. And Junior got in the car, and she brought him home. My mother loved Dory's resolute style, and she would say to me, you know, Dory's the type of person where you'd sit down and talk to her about something, and she would smile, and she would shake her head, and she'd be very polite, and you'd have a lovely conversation, and you might try to influence her in one direction or the other, and after the conversation, you would know as Dory walked away that she was going to do exactly what she wanted to do. A couple of months ago, I was having this conversation with my mom, and I was reminding her that essentially Sasha is Dory's daughter, and it's almost like someone transplanted Dory's personality into Sasha. And my mother was a little less PC at the time, and she said to me, well, then Sasha must be as stubborn as a mule. She told all her grandchildren that they were her favorite, and somehow she pulled it off because they all believed it. And incredibly, it was true. She was also extremely honest. A couple of years ago, we were at the funeral of a controversial family member, and she turned to me and Andrea and said, I just can't get too broken up about this. Her family was extremely important to her, and Lan was the apple of her eye. She credited herself on a regular basis with Lan becoming a doctor, because she said if she did not completely rewrite Lan's papers as an undergrad and his application essays, he never would have gotten into medical school. She had an incredible bond with her sisters. And in her more recent creative phase, we had some really interesting conversations. I walked in one day several weeks ago, and she said, Michael, were you at Shoes for dinner? And I said, no, Mom. And she said, well, she made enough food for an army. Did you help Shoe pack? And I said, no, Mom. And she said, well, you should have. She needed help. And later in the conversation, she said to me, or I said to her, Mom, you're talking about Shoe a lot today. You must really miss Shoe. And she looked at me and she said, oh, you know, Shoe is everything. A week or so later, I walked into her room and she said, Michael, I am never making Passover again. Nobody helped me except for Dory, and Dory made some soup with brown stuff in it. And I said, Mom, that brown stuff was probably mushrooms because Dory makes vegan soup. And she goes, well, whatever it was very good, but no one helped me. And, you know, Frida was there, and Frida was extremely angry. And, you know, Frida, she was effing this and F that, F this, F that. And I said, oh, Frida, I totally agree with the way you feel, but don't worry about it. I said, Mom, why was Frida so upset? She said, oh, the painter screwed up Frida's house. And but that my mother would make sure that, you know, that they corrected it. Oh, she also said to me that, you know, well, she would never make Passover again. She looked at me and she said, you know, Sheldon has a big mouth, but he can actually be quite helpful. He got everybody out of the kitchen, he set up the chairs, and he helped clean up. Many times recently I walked into her room and she would say, Michael, get me a cigarette. And I'd say, Mom, I thought you quit. She said, that was then, this is now, get me a cigarette. Her strong will and her determination were resolute until her last breath. Everybody has heard this story, or most people have heard this story, but I have Lome blood, and I get to tell my stories twice. Right, Lan? So On Thursday, we went to visit my mom, and she was not responsive, except for when Dory put her arm on my mother's shoulder, and my mother opened her eyes and looked at her, and there was definitely an awareness there. On Saturday, I came over, and I sat down on the bed right next to my mom's bed, and I put my arm on my hand on my mother's shoulder, and I said, "Mom, it's Mike, it's Michael, it's Michael." And she opened her eyes. She gave me the biggest, most beautiful, Florence Lome smile, Florence L Becker smile. She mouthed, "I loved you." I said, "Mom, I love you too, and it's so great to see you with your eyes open." And she smiled again, and that was it. Surely she was an element of goodness and kindness that have followed us all the days of our lives, and she will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
You say amen to that prayer, Michael. Now I'm going to ask our friends from the cemetery staff to lower the casket. As we do so, I'm going to recite from Psalm 121. Shir Lamalot, Esayin Elarim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai, Ose Shamayim Va'aretz, Ayiten Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanum Shomrecha, Hine Lo Yanum Velo Yishan, Shomer Yisrael, Adonai Shomrecha, Adonai Tzilcha Yad Yaminecha, Yomam Hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata v'yad olam. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm and guard your life. God guards your going and your coming, now and forevermore. Al Mekoma Tavo V'Shalom. May Adina Bat Zev and Miriam go unto God in peace. Let us say amen. Before the vault cover is placed on top, I'm going to add Israeli earth. There's already Israeli earth inside the casket as part of the Tahara process, and this symbolizes her eternal connection to the people in the land of Israel. Now going to recite a prayer called Siduk Hadin. Hatzur tamim polo ki chol derachav mishpat elamuna ve'navel tzedik v'yashar hu. Hatzur tamim b'chol po'al mi'omar lo matifal shalit v'matav v'mal mimeidu mechayem urit shol v'ya'al. Hatzur tamim b'chol ma'aseh mi'omar lo mataseh omer v'oseh chesed chinam lanu taseh. V'vizchut hanekad kesek shiva v'aseh. Tzadik b'chol derachav hatzur tamim erech apayim u'malei rachamim. Chamona v'chus na'lavot uvanim ki lecha adon aslichot v'rachamim. Tzadik atah Adonai lamito l'chayot. Asher b'yadcha pikton kol ruchot chalil lecha zichronenu limchot. V'yunainecha b'rachamim aleinu fikuchot. Ki lecha adon arachamim v'aslichot. Adamim ben shana yeh v'alav shanim yichya. Ma yitrono kol haya yeh baruch dayan ha'emet b'midu mechayeh. Baruch hu ki emet dino, mishoteda kol beino mishalem ladam cheshbono v'dino, v'akol ishmod yayitzenu. Yadanu Adonai ki tzedek mishpatecha titzdak bidvarecha v'tizkeh b'shovtecha, ve'en la'aher achar midat shovtecha, tzadik atah Adonai v'yashar mishpatecha, dayan emet shofet tzedek v'emet baruch dayan ha'emet, shekol mishpatav tzedek v'emet, nefesh kol chai biyadecha tzedek malah yaminecha, Rachim aplitat tzon v'yadecha v'tomar l'malach heref yadecha gadol ha'etza v'rav hallelujah asher inecha pikuchot al kol darchei v'nei adam latet lish ki drachav v'chriv me'alalav la'gid ki asher Adonai tzriv alav latabo Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach yehi shem Adonai mevorach u'rachum yechaper avon v'lo yashrit v'yirba l'ashiva po v'lo ya'ir Kol chamato vayashov ha'afar al ha'aretz k'shaya v'ruach tashuv el Elohim asher natana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May Florence Becker's soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Send comfort, O God, to those who mourn. Grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. And let us please say, Amen. I'm going to ask those who are seated if you're able to please stand. So I'm going to cite the El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShchina, B'malot Kidoshim U'Teorim, Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat, Adina bat Zev Miriam shalcha liolama began eden menuchata ana bal harachamim hastirei beseiter kenafecha liolamim utzror b'tzror chaim nishmata Adonai nachlata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. To the soul of Florence Becker, Adina bat Ze'ev Miriam, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May she always rest in peace. And let us once again say, Amen. This time I'm going to ask the immediate family to recite the Mourner's Kaddish along with me. Do you need it? I have. Okay. You can do it together? Okay. Yitzkadal, Yitzkadash, Shemei Rabba, Ve'alma, Divrach, Yerutei, Ve'amlich, Malchutei, V'chaye Echon, V'yom Echon, V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'izman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam U'lalmei Olmaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnasei, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha B'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You can be seated for a moment. In the Jewish tradition, it is we, her friends, family, and community who are asked to put her to her final rest. It's considered in our tradition chesed shalamet, a great mitzvah of loving compassion. It's something that we can do for her that she can never return the favor, but we do it out of our love and our caring. So in a moment, I'll have the funeral director come and give a few instructions for safety, but there's a few customs if you'd like to observe them when we do this. One is that we do at least 3 shovelfuls. 3 is considered a chazaka, that we're not doing it quickly and leaving it alone, that it's something that we're doing out of our love and obligation. Secondly, we don't hand the shovel from person to person like we're in a rush or we're having a good time. Rather, you put the shovel back in the earth, hold it for the next person to take it, or leave it on the ground. And the third, that some people have the custom of the first shovelful of turning the shovel, the blade upside down, because that reminds you that it's an act of loving kindness. You'd never normally use a shovel that way. It reminds you of the special obligation that you have today.
Ask anyone who's going to participate to please wear gloves, just in these days. I would ask those from the immediate family first to please step forward.
Obviously, be careful around the graveside.
coming.
Oh, God, for sure, of course.
Oh. Is this the Zoom?
Wanted everybody to get one chance. Gentlemen, we move the earth to the edge and then we'll fill in.
Did she rewrite your essays? She did. She did. I used to say, she said she did. She did. And then I would turn around. Really, English wasn't very strong. But I got A's. She knew that stuff. No, really. What, for a year, freshman.
Mark it off.
Rabbi, you want the shirt going up this way and then,
Yeah.
and then
We'll announce that there's going to be the shura and then the mincha. Sure. Folks, can I have your attention? Everybody in the immediate family should be over here. Everybody else can make two lines facing each other like a corridor. And it's called the shura. As the family makes its way into Shiva, we're going to surround them with the love of the community. So if the immediate family could start up there. Leon, all the children. If you know the words that come for you, say to them. And God come for you amongst all the other mourners in Zion and Jerusalem. Amen.